Good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, May 6, 2021, and we're here for a work session. As always, we'll start with the pledge. I think we should change things up today. Chief, I think you should lead us in the pledge. What do you think?
Nice.
And then sing the Star Spangled Banner.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nice work, Chief. Thank you. Okay, just a reminder for everybody that the marijuana survey will remain available online on the town website until tomorrow, May 7th at 4 p.m. So we're encouraging everybody who hasn't already done so to log on and complete the survey. It should take you less than 2 minutes, and the feedback is really important and critical to the direction that the town's going to go on the marijuana conversation. So moving forward, we'll jump right into it. First discussion on for today is matters surrounding fees for fire hydrant inspections. Tim and Ken, I understand you guys have been working on this. Do you want to
Yes.
get us started and introduce the item?
So, yes, so there's meeting with the fire marshals, just became evident that there's, when we have construction of new complexes, commercial buildings and so forth, our water district provides water up until where we actually enter the private property line. And from thereafter, it is up to the individual contractor, the builder, to establish fire mains, fire hydrants, and so forth on private property. So when we go into commercial development, often you need to keep access for construction reasons during that property. So many times, only a portion of the hydrant or water mains are laid in place. Then they're filled, they're inspected, they're filled in, and then another portion of the property is opened up. So it becomes multiple and repetitive times and tasks to go back and forth, and many returns to the property during the actual construction process. So this just helps establish some fees, sometimes to keep projects moving along. Our fire marshals may have to respond, on a weekend, weekday, and so sometimes there's overtime, so this helps alleviate those costs and keeps projects moving, construction projects moving forward. So I'd like to invite our Fire Marshal, Craig Zidek, to come forward to kind of speak about it, to give us a more in-depth understanding. Thank you, Craig.
Can you go to the podium, Craig? Thanks.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Good
Craig.
morning.
So as Ken said, excuse me.
You're gonna run out on us, aren't you?
They're calling you already,
Get
Craig.
out of here.
The Riverhead Town Water District handles everything on the town side up to the RPZ, and after the RPZ, it's what we call private fire service mains, which the contractor installs. Most of the time, the only information we really get on those is what's presented on the site plan. We have to go out and make numerous inspections. Just to give you an idea, Vistas at Baiting Hollow, which is just 4 condominium buildings. I've been out there 3 times already doing just the rotting and thrusting inspections before they backfill. Again, as Ken mentioned, due to the constraints and the layout of the project, they were doing it in sections. So that's 3 inspections that we had to do. The town receives no money on it because we don't do any permits for that. Along with this, there's hydraulic calculations that need to be reviewed by our office. There are the layout of where things are going to go. We've had projects where they've put hydrants which were not conducive to where the fire service needed them, and it was problematic to get them placed where they needed to be. Having permit system in place where they present all this to us for review prior to, laying the mains and doing all the work will help us to alleviate a lot of these problems, as well as the numerous inspections that are required to be made by the fire marshal's office to see that everything is being done correctly and to code, which is why we're looking to, have permits established that they would be required, and then, again, the town receives the money for those inspections.
Craig, what would the fees be? Do you have something in mind?
There's, the fees are laid out in there.
Oh,
Page 2.
okay. Each two, okay.
And it's on sort of a sliding scale. There's the initial fee of, I believe it's $250 for the plan submission and review. And then, because some projects are small, and it's only a short a short bit of fire service main, and then you have other projects like Costco, which has probably about 20 hydrants and quite a bit of rather large main, and we were there numerous times. So they would pay an additional fees based on the amount of pipes and the length of the pipe that's laid, as well as the number of fire hydrants. David, I think you put in here about $50 per hydrant. You know, you may want to consider $100 per hydrant. Again, because we have to go back, we have to look at how all the piping is put together, make sure that it's joined properly, make sure that they have rotting that holds the pipe sections together. There's thrust blocking that has to be put in at turns, so that when the water goes through the main doesn't move and come apart. We have to do hydrostatic testing, so where the pipes are all pressurized, they have to hold pressure for a certain period of time. We have to witness the flushing. The flushing is based upon the size of the pipe, the number of feet of the pipe, which will tell you what the pressure needs to be and for how long it needs to be, so that we can make sure all the sediment and rocks are flushed out of there, especially if it is hooking up to a fire sprinkler system, because the last thing we want is pebbles and rocks in the fire sprinkler system, in which case it's going to block the fire sprinklers if they ever activate. We also, other inspections that go along with that are, we have to make sure that the valves are properly secured at the RPZ and other places, so that somebody doesn't accidentally or intentionally go and shut the valves off and shut down the fire protection water to an entire plaza or building. And then again, the hydrants need to be flow tested initially to make sure that we can get the gallonage that's required, that was, you know, designed by the design professional for the building or the complex that's there, that we can actually get that required flow out of those hydrants. So this involves quite a bit of time on the fire marshal's side, you know, in addition to the building that's being built and so forth.
So Craig, also, because you're involved in emergency services and emergency responses, I think it's good to point out that if you had an inspection, for example, scheduled on a Friday morning, and we got a major structure fire, and you were asked to then respond to a fire scene to do an investigation, sometimes, short of personnel or anything, you just might not be able to make those inspections. So I
That's
think with
correct.
these minimal fees, it would allow you so that if you had to stay late or had to respond on a site, we'd hate to think that a construction project is being held up for multiple days because we weren't able to get there because there was an emergency scene.
Well, it would certainly help to reimburse the town if we end up having to do, additional inspections or inspections on overtime,
Yeah.
something like that. A lot of times, we do go out early in the morning to meet with the contractors and do inspections prior to normal work hours,
Yeah.
because that's the only time that we can shut down systems in the building,
Yeah.
where we can test them before, in order to meet the contractors'
I would think
obligation.
contracts with such a minimum fee, I think
Right.
contractors would embrace this to know that their projects are keep moving along.
So
Yes.
Craig, can you just clarify whether this is just for the initial installation or if this is for regular ongoing inspections?
This is for the initial, but it also outlines the requirements that are required. Fire hydrants, fire service mains, fire sprinkler systems are required to be inspected annually. Okay, so this also goes into laying out that for private fire service hydrants and all the mains, they hire a private company who inspects them as per NFPA 24 and NFPA 25, which is, one is about fire hydrants, the other is water-based fire suppression systems. They provide that documentation to us. So this is also putting them on notice that, they need to do that as well, and they're gonna have to continue to do that throughout the life of the system.
Right.
So Craig, exactly is being enacted here? What
Currently,
exactly is happening?
Currently, we do not have any permits when somebody goes and installs a fire service main, private fire service main to a new building. Whether it was Riverview Lofts, or for the new one that's going up on East Main Street, places like Costco even. There was work that's done on the part of the fire marshal to make sure that everything is to code and is done properly in the inspections, but there is nothing that the town recoups in the way of our our hours that we're out there working to see that these things are installed properly.
So this is not updating, this is actually adding an extra step in.
Well, it's a step that we're already doing. What we're trying to do is add the permit requirement so that then we can charge the fees and the town can recoup the money for inspections that we are already doing, that the town is basically, you know, the contractors, the builders and all are getting for free.
So you're saying that you keep coming out and doing these anyways,
Correct.
you're adding in an extra step at the beginning of the process where you charge the fee and you built it right in, is what you're saying?
Yes, we're trying to get everything up front so that we can review it before this project gets done. Before we're going out to the scene and we're seeing pipe is already in and we don't have any of the required documentation yet. We'd like to review it prior to it being put in the ground so that we don't show up one day and say, well, that's very nice, however, this isn't going to work. We need to, you know, we need to move some things around here because these hydrants are not in the proper location as per the code or for the fire services use. You know, that type of thing. It's easier to change it on paper ahead of time than it is once things are laid in the ground.
And the project you were referring to was up by, across from the pool house at Giorgio's, are those the condos you're talking about?
Yes, yeah, Bating Hollow Vistas. Just as an example, you know, I've been up there 3 times to do that because they've done their fire service main in 3 separate sections due to the way the project is running. So that's 3 inspections that I've had to go up there and do, the town recoups no money on.
So you're saying if you have this step built in, you wouldn't be going out for those?
I would still be going out, but at least the town, they would have paid a fee for the permit. Therefore, that fee is covering some of my time going out there. The town is getting some money because other projects and other permits that also need to be inspected, I've got to work this in between those.
So not necessarily adding in an extra step, you're saying those steps are already done, adding in an extra fee?
Correct. Yes.
But also could be cost savings to a contractor for you to be able to review something ahead of time before work is already done.
Right.
That's a giant cost savings factor
Well,
to a
yes,
contractor
knowing
having to
that they
replace
have-
existing mains.
What the required inspections are and that they need to contact us because sometimes we find these things out. There's been more than a few jobs where we've gone out to do an inspection on a portion of the building that's going up and found that, you know, fire service main work has already been done and basically completed, and the contractors don't like it when we tell them, well, now you have to dig this back up because we never did inspections and we are not going to sign off on it, and your project, it will be dead in the water until we get this fixed, because you can't install a fire sprinkler system, we won't sign off on that because we don't know that the fire service main is adequate and has been installed properly.
And just to be clear, Craig, we're not singling out any particular project here, right?
No,
It's
no, I'm just
for
talking in
purposes of
general.
illustrating the example,
Correct.
we're not singling anybody out.
No, I'm not, you know, Bating Hollow, the Vistas at Bating Hollow's doing things properly. They've passed their inspections for that. We're just using them as an example.
Right.
Craig, how
So-
similar is this to other towns surrounding us?
I'm not certain, Tim, I believe Brookhaven requires it. I'm not certain about Southampton. But I believe David, when he was developing this, looked at the other towns. This was actually, I think, originally presented back in 2015.
Right.
And I know he looked at them back then, and I believe other townships, again, for the same reasons. Some do, some don't. You know, it's just like everything else.
Well,
You
this
don't know,
is,
and you don't know about Southold, Craig?
I'd have to go back and look at it. I have not
I
had
don't
a
know, we
chance
just
to.
would always tend to look at Southampton, Southold, and Brookhaven. Right, Bob? Thank you, Craig. So the fire, with the placement of the fire hydrants and such, isn't that on the site plan too? Or,
That is, but it's sort of general. It's not, we would want something more specific, along with the size of the pipe that's going to be placed in there, you know, as well as we need to know the hydraulic calculations so that we can see that we're going to get the required water flows and all. There's a whole list of things, and if you read through this document that David had prepared, it does a fairly decent job of describing them. There's a number of different codes through NFPA, as well as state and so forth, as well as some others that these things need to comply with. It's not just a simple looking at it and saying, okay, this is good. An engineer has to design it. We have to make sure that his design meets the requirements of these various codes, and then go out and inspect and see that what the engineer has designed and given to us is what in fact the contractor has installed, and make sure that, again, it's been installed properly, that it has the proper thrust blocking, that it has the proper rotting done, that when we do the flushing, that we've gotten all the stones out of it. It's rather involved.
Permit process, though, also, I think, allows to incorporate your knowledge, your expertise into the planning process, meaning that sometimes what always looks great on a site plan, an
Right.
engineer's plan, doesn't always work well in the field, and you're
This
more
is very
familiar in
true.
terms of for the fire departments that we have in this town, and the size of apparatus and access roads and how to properly, it's a lot different fighting a fire, that's on the water with wind direction and so forth, than something, in the center of our town, and just things, and accessing what's adjacent buildings, and so forth, and having proper clearances where your hydrants are located. This allows you to evaluate all of that
Yes.
prior to them beginning construction by doing the permit process. So I think it's an excellent, what this is proposing also is a great safety barrier for future, for firefighting service and protecting our firefighters.
And some of the issues that you just referred to have been issues with some of the downtown buildings.
There've been
I know,
issues throughout
right,
all of the
correct.
town, and some contractors are very, very good. They know what they need to do, that this isn't, the first time they've done this type of thing. They put it in, we go out there, we look at it, and everything is fine. Then other contractors, it's either their first time, or they just don't really understand what it is they're supposed to be doing. And we go out there and there's numerous issues, and then we have to, work through everything with them. By having everything presented to us ahead of time, when we go out there, we can work with these contractors, we can see which ones are gonna be issues and try and address those issues prior to, the work being done.
Okay, well, Tim
Thank
and
you,
Ken,
Craig.
thank you for bringing this forward. I know the supervisor's pleased that this has been an ongoing issue and it's finally going to be hopefully dealt with here properly. So do you guys want to get feedback from the surrounding towns, from Craig, as far as what the other towns are doing? Are you comfortable moving forward?
Well, one other thing with this was developed in 2015. I kind of wonder why it's been tabled and sitting around for so long. But we may have to, some of these prices that you put in here, like the extra hydrants, where it's put in for $50, in 2015, that might have been sufficient. Is it something we need to look at and maybe raise a little bit more now in 2021?
We can look at it again, however, David did go back through it last week.
Okay.
Prior to submitting it.
All right, good.
Because we were trying to push it again, and we realized that some of the codes had changed, as well as some of the pricing had changed, and he went through and updated things.
Okay, perfect.
I read through it, I think we're good. I think the only thing we may really want to consider is he put down $50 per fire hydrant, and perhaps we should boost that to 100, but that's entirely up to you folks.
Well, this is from 2015. Yeah, I never saw this before, but I understand everything you're saying. I never think it hurts actually to talk to other towns and see what they have. Sometimes by looking what other towns have, we're being proactive because maybe they came upon some issues that we weren't aware of that are helpful for us before we move forward.
I believe David did look at the other towns, but
Okay.
again,
But you'll confirm.
I
So
will
maybe you can
confirm
just
that.
send a quick email around, Craig, to the board and just confirm that it's consistent with what the other towns are doing, and
Very
we
good.
can be
I
ready to move forward.
also think it's pretty good to lead by example for safety measures, Craig. Thank you.
Good stuff.
Thank you,
Craig, don't
Craig.
go anywhere because we need you for the next item also.
Okay.
Get yourself comfy
You're
there.
up to bat again. So the next item on the agenda is matters surrounding possible change to tent fees, which is another Hubbard and Rothwell item. Guys, do you want to take it away?
Do you want to talk to me?
Yeah, this has been outdated for quite some time, and if you look at the comparisons on the sheet that we have for the other towns, you'll see that what is put up here now is what's being recommended versus, I believe, right, these are the recommended prices for Riverhead.
Yes.
On the spreadsheet,
Yes.
right? These are the updated new ones.
Yes, I think
Right,
so.
because the old ones, we were way behind on a lot of what the surrounding towns are doing. And as I'm sure Craig can attest, that sometimes these tent inspections are, come in with moments' notice at times, and it's always on a Friday for a weekend, or it's always 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, causing overtime and everything else. So to make it more viable for us financially to do these inspections, we needed to update this, and I appreciate the time you put into this to give us the updated prices. And as you can see, we're more in line now with what the other towns are doing.
I think when someone's planning a wedding, and we'd all like to think it's always gonna be sunny and shining on every wedding day outside, but when Friday comes and the weather forecast kicks in, we don't want to, I know that you never wanted to say no to anybody that suddenly needs a tent or something like that to protect themselves, and so you guys, you go out there, after hours, late times, just to make sure that things happen for people, so that's greatly appreciated. But also, there's a cost factor involved in that as well. And so I think also this advocates for people trying to make decisions, at least we had said at least 7 to 10 days prior to the event, and then that it could happen, but there'd be additional fees if something was within 24 hours, in other words, right?
Correct. Just so you know, Carol Scalfani did the comparison of the fees for me, so
Yeah.
she deserves your thanks on that.
Thank you, Carol.
As of yesterday, I think we've gotten 8 tent applications. In the last 2 days, we've had 8 tent applications come in, most of which are for this coming weekend. I think there's a couple that are for the following week. But Friday isn't even here yet, and typically Friday is the day that somebody's got something planned for the weekend, and all of a sudden the weather has taken a change, and the tents are going up, and we're getting the applications at the end of the day on Friday, and so not even time to get processed, and a lot of times by the time we do get them processed and we go out there, the tents are already down because they were up and down over the weekend.
How is
So
this impacted by COVID, though? I mean, we're still in COVID emergency right now, and I know people are looking for more outdoor space
Right.
and using tenting more.
Right.
Yes, and that's fine, I don't have a
Yeah.
problem. What we're looking to do is trying to find out and get things into us ahead of time so that we have a chance to process it, review their plans and where they're gonna put them, and then go out and schedule somebody to do the inspection. Right now, we have one fire marshal on Fridays.
Right.
So, Friday is gonna be running around doing as many tent inspections as we can. The other problem we run into is that the tent company will tell you that it's going up on a particular day, and then when you go out there, it's not up yet. Or they'll put it up after our hours, or they may not put it up at all because, well, the weather turned out to be nice, so we don't need it anymore. So, but in the meantime, we're still going out there to do an inspection on something that hasn't been erected. So we'd like to try and get it in ahead of time. We'd like to try and get them to make an appointment so that we can go out there just like we'll do with inspections, so that at 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon, I am going to such and such a place to inspect this tent, and as opposed to going there 2 or 3 times and finding out that the tent still hasn't been put up or they haven't completed it.
I'm just curious, did you ask any feedback from the tent industry locally? Because they're usually good family businesses and, people that you rely on, like Ken said, and I don't know if you had any interaction with them or asked them.
Talking to some of the owners, but again, they're driven by when somebody comes in on a Friday afternoon and says, oh, my wedding is tomorrow, and now all of a sudden they're saying we may have an afternoon cloudburst.
And if there's additional fees, this is something they can pass along to their customer, I guess.
Yes, I would think so. If they put the tent up when they say they're going to put it up, and it's not last minute, then there isn't a problem. We'll go out there and inspect it. But so many times, we go out there and the tent is put up after hours, or it's put up on a weekend when we may not have had somebody working, so somebody has to go out on overtime. The tents are not put up at all. The other problem we run into is that sometimes the tents are not put up correctly in accordance with the code. And so we make phone calls to the tent company and say, listen, you need to come out here and fix this, which most of them are good about doing. Most of the local ones we have a very good relationship with. They know what we're looking for. They put the tents up correctly the first time. We have very few issues. It's the tent companies that come from out of town, especially up west, and they just put something up, the tent isn't braced properly, it isn't staked, there's any number of things. It doesn't have the required emergency lighting and exit signs if they have sides on it, it doesn't have fire extinguishers, any number of things. It isn't properly strapped, there's pieces of the frame missing. I can't, we can't sign off on that. We have to call them back and say, you need to come back and fix this, and then we have to come back again and inspect it a second time, and sometimes even a third time, depending on the companies. Some of them are very good, others not so much.
So Ken and Tim, this is increasing the fees for the tents? That's what this is?
Correct.
Yes, but it also, I think the best part about this is that you're setting a time frame. Okay, so if somebody knows that there are lesser fees and so forth, to make your decision 10 days out, to put yourself on his schedule, on the inspection schedule, to have it outlined. But if somebody does call on a Friday morning and say, it's gonna rain tomorrow and we've got a wedding and we need a tent, and could you guys, change your schedule, come down here, you're off tomorrow, will you come over and still do it? They don't wanna say no, they've been great in the office, so they accommodate, but they're entitled to get paid for that, which means overtime and extra fees. And so this kind of outlines so that it's not a guess factor, that people know exactly, what they're paying, and we're covering their fees, our fire marshal's overtime fees, so it keeps them within our yearly budget. And people will know that, okay, it is Friday morning, and if I do want a tent tomorrow, this is what my permit fees are, and this is what my cost is gonna be, and it explains it more clearly.
So some of these, so the fees, yeah, you're building in a little bit of a time frame, but the fees are actually going up.
Mhm.
So these fees, some of these fees are paid by restaurants and wineries. They're adding, a lot of the restaurants and wineries, as Frank talked about, are adding tents and such because of COVID.
Yeah, some tent companies obtain permits and fees, and others do put it on the occupancy or the person that is actually renting to obtain the permit fees.
Right, so sometimes the fee is paid by perhaps the restaurant or the winery, and sometimes the fee, maybe for a wedding, is paid by the,
Usually the fees,
Company?
well, again, sometimes it's paid by the tent company. Tent company normally files all the paperwork with us because they know what we're looking for, they have all the documentation. With regard to the COVID outdoor dining, the board did extend, I believe until the end of June, the COVID outdoor dining, which along with the associated, if they file for a COVID outdoor dining permit, then the tent fees are waived under the resolution.
but for wineries, this is what I'm asking you.
Wineries also, I believe,
For-
we've done without,
Well, that I need to, that's what I want to clarify from you guys, because my only concern here is the timing of this. Certainly, I know from code revision, a lot of our fees were really antiquated and behind. We did a lot of work cleaning up fees with building and planning over a time period. Just my concern here is that a lot of these small businesses, our local wineries and restaurants, and a lot of them have been really devastated by COVID, so I'm a little concerned at this time when they're struggling to get their feet, get themselves back up and running, to be increasing fees at this time. So that's what I'm referring to, and that's what I wanted to check on.
This wasn't a huge jump, Catherine, in fees, but it was making it more towards what it should be. And I think any of those fees are just gonna be passed on to the customer anyway.
Well,
So-
that's what I want to clarify.
Yeah, I mean, you're not gonna
Tim,
really, you're not really,
because we know,
impose-
that businesses are struggling. I mean, I've talked,
Right.
just yesterday, I was speaking with one of the local caterers who said, we don't have, at this moment, we're just putting money out, we don't have money
Mm-hmm.
coming in. So just that they're struggling so much at this time, I just want to find out if this fee increase is going to be passed along in any way to wineries, restaurants, and our small businesses in our area that are struggling.
As Craig said, most of those fees have been waived. I think this is more designed towards, somebody could rent a 10,000 square foot tent and pay thousands of dollars for that. And for $250 is a minimal fee to have a permit in place, and for the safety factor of it, to make sure that it is getting inspected, that the fire marshals have responded, and that have deemed it appropriately and safe. I think it's a minimal fee,
And
for
what you're
for
saying
a
is
large-scale project.
this will kick in after the COVID
Yeah, we
waived
Tim, I don't
fees
think
that
we didn't set a necessary time frame on it or a timeline.
No, but we already passed,
This
But-
doesn't affect the downtown
Correct.
stipulations that we put in for their pricing.
okay.
This is more for the outer parts of town.
Special events.
Downtown, we made through the bid, we waived certain fees and put certain fees up to get the downtown restaurants, give them a little bit of a break.
Right.
But this is gonna be, this will be townwide, but this will not affect downtown until after June.
Well,
Unless
I'm
we
talking
decide
about
in
for
June to
a-
extend it
Oh, I'm
again.
sorry, Tim. I'm talking about, for example, I know Jamesport Manor has a tent outside. I'm talking about wineries and some of those businesses. I just want you guys to clarify that this isn't going to be an extra fee for example, Jamesport Manor, or some of the wineries that are really working their tail off to get their business up and running. I might not want to do it at this time.
Excuse me, in the case of Jamesport Manor, you know, he did apply for a COVID outdoor dining permit last year. The tent was erected, no fee involved. That's for the dining. Now, if he decides to do a wedding, however, and he's gonna put
Right.
up a tent for a wedding for the weekend, I mean, that would be something that he should pay a fee on, I would believe.
And that gets passed on to the
And that would
customer.
get passed on to the
Sure.
customer, yes.
Yep.
You know.
I agree, yeah.
Craig,
Well, that's what I'm looking to clarify.
one thing here, Craig, is on
And be
the
sure.
maximum number of days that it can be erected. In Riverhead, we're 180 days. None of the other towns are even remotely close to that. If it's up for 180 days, do you go out and inspect it at intervals? Because things could change over the course of 6 months with a tent. Do you go back out, and then would there be a fee for that inspection?
The state fire code says, and the state building code say that a tent may be erected for a maximum of 180 days.
Okay,
After that, it's no longer a temporary structure. Now it's actually considered a permanent structure, and there's additional codes that it needs to meet. We are supposed to go out and inspect them after, you know, if we know they're gonna be up that long. Generally, we're out at those places for other things during the course of that time, and we'll take a look at it then. But that would be something that we need to tighten up a little bit on, some of the additional inspections for the tents that are up that
or
long.
can we make a day longer than 8 hours for you guys?
It already is many days.
Already long days, right? Thank you, Craig.
That's really interesting, Craig. I didn't even consider 180 days after that it becomes a permanent structure.
Well,
That's
under the
very
state, the
interesting.
way the state code is written.
Yes, makes sense to me, but
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
Well,
you,
I'm
Chris.
gonna-
Thank you, Craig.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
I put a lot of time into this, thank you very much. Appreciate
And
it.
I am gonna say, some of the tents really, you know, like, I did have dinner the other night at Jamesport Manor, and actually, it was really pretty. You had a nice view of the fields, it was warm in there, so, sometimes the tents aren't such a bad thing.
No.
Okay,
Thank you.
We're gonna take these back to code revision, Ken?
Yes.
And run through code revision with them, and if there's any changes or whatnot, we'll present to the board and let them know, but we'll run it through code revision is the next step.
Yeah.
perfect.
And we absolutely will protect, you know, our downtown businesses, restaurants and so forth, you know, to avoid being out with COVID. I think these are more designed towards special events, weddings and other outdoor things
Yeah,
that,
well, and I wanna protect our other small businesses, not just downtown.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, Tim and Ken, you're up again, also with Eric Howard, and we have Ray Coyne to discuss matters surrounding hotel and motel beach passes.
That reminds me of the song. Right, Lisa? Tell.
Just to give a quick background on this, before Ray and Eric get started, this is something that in the past has been done where the town has given beach permits to local lodging establishments so they could pass them on to their customers who are staying, say, at the Hyatt or at any number of the motels, hotels around town. And if they're staying there, they would have access to our beaches because they would almost be considered a resident since they're staying here for, you know, X number of days or a week or whatever the case may be. It was, the problem came in last year during COVID where all of a sudden our beaches became overpopulated. And not necessarily just from our own residents, but from people up west We found a lot of people from New York City flocking out here to the beaches, either buying a one-day pass, which was allowed at the time, or just illegally parking or finding some way around to get to our beaches. So the issue from the residents became, hey, you got to cut this out, and we did. I think, Chief, you guys got together and ended the one-day passes, non-resident passes, so you couldn't come from out of town and buy a pass and use our beach. But we still did allow the hotels to hand them out to their customers. So the argument is going to be, do we continue doing that to help with our local hospitality industry and give them the option to pass these placards or passes out to their customers to use our beaches? Or do we shut that off altogether also? Because again, we found with COVID, our beaches were getting overcrowded. So we need to know, Ray, I'm going to have you talk, but give us an idea of how many of these passes are handed out and used over the course of the season, because that's going to be a big factor in deciding what we want to do.
Before you get started, Ray, I just want
Not
to
even
point out,
that many, I think.
we just got this now, so we're going to have the office post this online so the public can get it. We didn't have this before.
Yeah, that's old code, the Old Town Code 48-13 that we were going off for the last 30-some-odd years. We do sell about 35 on an average per year. It brings in a little over $2,000. But we have several operators that have been doing this for 25, 30 years that are, anticipating this. They always anticipate it. So last year we did give out, I think, 31 total. And so this year we're just looking for a direction on where to go. So I think Eric can probably explain more of what, I guess what has to be done in the code. But just from our standpoint, we're just looking for a direction of what to do moving forward.
So, Ray, can I just ask you, when you give a pass to a hotel, so somebody in Wading River lived in Brookhaven, they can buy a beach pass, in other words, a non-resident beach pass,
Correct.
pay $150, and, and in Wading River is a case, they could live a mile from the beach and be in Brookhaven and pay non-resident and utilize that back and forth. So that's issued to one particular, vehicle or family. In the hotel industry, when you buy one of these 35 passes, though, it's not a one-time use, right? These are placards that go from different car in there continuously, so somebody checks out, I presume they give the placard back?
Yep,
And then
yep.
somebody else checks in and they get the placard, so it's a
Yeah.
little more, it's not like,
Yeah, it's
Not
not
about
that we sold
35.
32, but it's not just 32 being used
Yeah.
because it gets circulated throughout the entire
same
year.
passes utilized, 35 passes
Oh, I
are
see.
given
Yeah.
to anybody
big
else throughout the
difference.
year.
Yeah, we give them placards. Now we give them
Oh,
the
I
hang tags to
understand.
go on their car. And they're each dwell, it's got to be 2 or more dwellings, but each dwelling is allowed to have 1 pass each. So if you have a 10-room motel, then we could issue up to 10 passes, and then you would use that throughout the year.
So, yeah, so what you're, because first I was thinking, oh, that doesn't seem that much, but you're saying like, someone could have 5 placards that they use over and over.
Yeah, they'll circulate the
So
entire year.
actually, it's more people coming to the beaches than
Correct.
that, I understand. And the numbers went down last year, which is surprising because there were more people out here. The numbers went down by 4 less placards you gave out, you said?
No, I said like an
Average
average is
35.
35 to 40. I think it was 31, 32 total we sold last year. So yeah, it fluctuates though. It could be 40 this year. It could be 45, then it'll go down to 30. It fluctuates, depends on the hotel operators, who comes in and whatnot. But usually we get the same cast that comes in every year.
Okay, and maybe Eric can open our eyes a little bit to the code side of this and also the enforcement side of this.
Good morning. I can. All right, so on my end, this first came up in Justice Court. People were getting tickets at the beaches and coming in and saying, well, why am I getting a ticket? I have this rear view hanging parking permit that the hotel manager gave me. And, on first glance, it looked like they were right. They shouldn't have been getting the ticket. Then I subsequently had a conversation with the chief, and he advised me, well, there's no provision in the town code that says that these permits are authorized. And so I went and looked in the code, and he was absolutely right. There was nothing in there authorizing permits. So then I spoke with Ray and said, why, how are you authorizing these? And he pointed me at this chapter 48-13 of the old code that did provide for these hotel motel parking permits. Now, in reviewing the legislative history of the amendments to this chapter of the code, that was transferred over to the code that was renumbered in, I think it was 2017 or 2016. In looking at the legislative history, I can't find anywhere that indicates when this subsection C of 48-13 came out, okay? But at some point it did. So that's sort of a weird, quirky town code thing that isn't really relevant to anybody for the purposes of this discussion, just a little bit of history.
So it's admitted in the new code.
It's not currently in the new code.
Okay.
And so, from my view, in order to enforce in order to better enforce the parking permit requirements for the town beaches, this should be put back into the code. As an aside to that, from an enforceability standpoint, if this were to come back to the code, I think that there should be a process of looking at designs for these permits and determining, how exactly we want them to look. Because a lot of times, even if this code provision had been in there, these people would come into justice court and they got a parking ticket, and they, swear up and down that this parking permit was where it was supposed to be. It was hanging from the rearview mirror. And either the traffic control officer, the police officer, they didn't see it, or it must have fell down, or whatever. So do I take them at their word, or do I take our employee at his word that it wasn't there, right? So you have this he said, she said type of conflict that ultimately can only be resolved by going to trial on a $100 parking ticket. So I have some ideas as to what we should do in designing these permits. I don't know if we want to get into that now,
Couldn't
but
the inspector or the code enforcement just take a picture of the vehicle showing no placard?
I don't know. I don't know if I don't know what kind of camera I mean, obviously that would be
Yeah, everybody's
that would be a
carrying an
reasonable
iPhone.
that would
Yeah.
be a reasonable way of
Yeah.
addressing it. I'm not sure how that would work through PD with them, preparing their tickets and submitting everything to the justice court when they file the tickets after they've issued them.
Problem with it, that becomes evidence to the case, and if you're taking it like with your personal cell phone, that gets a little tricky for court
Yeah.
purposes, and certainly the police department's not gonna issue cell phones or cameras out to the officers to take pictures, so it becomes legally it becomes a
Chain
problem.
of custody type of
Chain of
issue.
custody, right, of evidence.
And then they would have to, sign an extra affidavit that says that, this photograph depicts exactly what I saw in such and such time, and it's an accurate representation of the vehicle and, what I observed, indicating that there was no permit.
And theoretically, their personal cell phone could be brought into court and used, and anything in that phone could be used. So it becomes a sticky wicket, if you will.
It seems like the mechanics, though, of the actual placard is secondary to the issue of whether you're going to continue to issue a permit of some kind or not. Or you're
Well,
going to,
something-
or you're
And I
going to
think
at all.
another issue is some of these are being duplicated on the outside.
Yeah, there's been some suggestion that maybe some in the past have been duplicated, and, yeah.
That's why something maybe should have a raised seal on it or something along those lines, or you'd suggested
Well, sort of how when you copy a check, the copy comes back and it has void in big bold letters, some kind of printing protection like that, or some sort of, hologram with the town seal that gets, blazoned on there. I don't know how much these types of things cost, but, there's just sort of ideas that I would suggest to prevent duplication.
So 35 placards can come to 50 or 60 placards through the use of a Xerox machine.
Correct. Yeah, and a laminator.
Ray, there's no way of knowing how many times those placards are used. You don't get feedback from the hotels or motels telling you, oh, it was used 30 times this season, or,
Traditionally, no, we have
Yeah.
never received that. I mean, we probably could if we wanted to.
I know that the Hyatt does have their guests sign them out. They sign them out, they sign them in. And so when this had come up, one of the things that I would ask the person when they say they had this hotel motel pass, I said, okay, well, you have to get me something from the hotel that shows that this was issued to you and you had it on the date, at
That
the
makes
time that you
perfect
got
sense to
that
me,
you
yeah.
got the ticket.
Yep.
But I mean, that's really only one piece of it, because the code says you have to display the permit. So the code violation that they're getting written for not having a permit is a failure to properly display the permit. And
whether
so,
they have the permit or not, they're guilty of failing to display it.
yeah, right, so they might have signed it out from the hotel and left it in their glove box, or, left it, under the seat or something, and so they got a ticket, and they failed to display it. So when these are issued, I mean, the permit itself should also say, in bold letters, failure to display this properly may result in a ticket for which you will be held, or we will seek to hold you responsible, something to that effect.
So a couple of things on this. I think that our beaches got very crowded because New York City beaches were closed much longer than our beaches. I think that the people coming to our beaches from out of town is increasing. And, we pay high taxes in Riverhead, which our taxes go to maintaining and taking care of our beaches. I think that the beaches should be for the residents. Some of the beaches, for example, the Reeves Beach and Wading River Beach, those are small beaches. So instead of having these placards that could be used and used and used again, couldn't the people who are visiting from out of town get a day pass?
I just want to point out one thing. Yeah, well, they could, but we're not
But then
giving
you're right
out
back to
day
the
passes
same
to anybody.
situation.
Right. Is that going to be changed again, or are you going to start doing day passes, or? are you
That's
gonna-
up to Emergency Management Chief of Police to let us know if we're going to be doing that or not, and the town board, obviously, to approve that. I just want to point out that these are not just big, large hotels. These are smaller, like cottages, like Reeves is every year. Reeves Cottages, Garrett Moore, Alan Stromberg. They're smaller businesses. So part of the incentive for these businesses to have people come here is to give them the option to go to the beaches. So I just want to let you know, take that into consideration as well. It's not the big hotels that are doing this. It's a lot of the smaller ones. So that's when they'll have an issue with it.
Well, tourism is important out here. But we do need to keep in mind that we are having, issues with more and more people coming and filling up the parking spots. Some of our beaches just aren't that big and don't even have that many parking spots. We've had this discussion, right, Ray?
Correct. Yeah, you're very right with that.
Just this past week, we talked about it with Wading River because we had all these issues with people parking on Oak and Central. So that's just something to think about. I understand tourism is important and it's an incentive, and I'm glad that you brought to, all our hotels are important. The Hyatt is important as well, but I do think that our beaches should really be for residents. So we have to figure that out.
Also, Ray, is in it the possibility, my own personal experience, when you travel different hotels around, many hotels offer shuttle service to beaches, so which alleviates parking. And so that it certainly could always be an option. We don't require passes for individuals on a basis to
No,
attend
it's
the beach.
just
But
parking
if somebody
fees.
stayed at the Hyatt and they wanted to run their own shuttle bus back and forth to beaches, it alleviates parking and allows access to the beach. So it's not that our beaches are currently closed to non-residents, it's the parking issue itself.
Correct.
Why not ask just as a thought, why not ask the shuttles, the hotels services to provide shuttle service?
Well, some of the bigger hotels, obviously. We have a lot of hotels actually in Riverhead, and hotels do, I believe hotels do very well in Riverhead. If you've ever had guests here, it's hard to get a room. But I think, yes, the bigger hotels have shuttles, but you just named off also
We mostly
a
sell
lot
it
of
to the
little
smaller
cottages
guys,
and
yeah.
business, and some of the smaller businesses, they obviously don't have shuttles.
Yeah, the majority of them are that we sell are the mom and pops, the cottages, things like that.
I fully agree with keeping the non-resident pass off this year, not allowing non-residents to buy a pass to use our beaches. However, in terms of this, I think if you're coming out here and you're gonna stay at a cottage or a smaller facility like that, you're gonna be here for a few days or a week or whatever the case may be. You're spending money in the town. You're helping to support the restaurants and other small businesses in town because you're here for a week. To give them the option to be able to provide a beach pass to them, I think it's very important to those businesses to have that to bolster up what they can offer for their customer. And also that customer then comes and supports the town. Whereas the person coming out here one day to the beach from the city is not spending money in the town. They're on the beach, and as I've heard from so many people,
Garbage.
that these people that come out there, they leave diapers, garbage, everything's a mess, they really don't care. They were here for one day and they're gone. I think the people that are more inclined to rent a place and be out here for several days are probably gonna be less apt to trash up a beach or whatever the case may be. So that's why I kind of support still doing this.
I know a bunch of the hotel owners, and they were very impacted by the COVID. Not just whether or not they could have people in their hotels, but the event code being at a standstill, not bringing people out, unfortunately for them. So COVID was a very hard time for them. Going forward, I think as long as it can be managed, that this is a benefit to them to be able to afford their customers, and as long as it's managed properly, I'm all for it.
Ray, how are we certain towards who is getting the placards? So is it specifically that you have to have a hotel, a management license or something? So what I'm specifically going for is, we're in embattlement with Airbnbs throughout our town.
Correct.
So we know we exist, they advertise, and so, are those individuals able to obtain these placards? And whether you expand on it, or Eric, or
The
Who's
code
obtaining
reads
them?
2 or more dwellings.
Right.
So the Airbnb is usually just one house, one household, things like that.
I
So-
agree, that should be something we take up, though. I think maybe, legalizing the code or making the code where you're at least getting permits and fees from them, instead of knowing that it's happening blatantly in your neighborhood, might be the option. And
Yeah.
I think it's something that should be
a good
revisited.
point,
It's
because
not
that
on the
code's-
agenda today, but
yeah.
That
Well,
code's
that's
over
something we
40 years
talked
old.
about.
yeah.
Yeah. Are you
That code
talking
was, yeah,
about?
that
I'm
code was
sorry.
made in the 60s and the 70s, so,
So
Are you
if
talking
a
about
house
having-
is subdivided and upstairs and downstairs, they can't get these
no,
placards?
no, it'd have to be a licensed 2 dwellings.
Okay,
They'd have to prove that.
thank you.
Are you talking about having, because we only have 30-day rentals, are you talking about maybe like doing 2-week rentals or something?
No, I'm just saying
Yeah.
that's not even on the agenda, but
No, I
that
know.
code should definitely be looked at, and instead of watching this happen before us, we should cash in on it a little bit and then regulate it. There can be,
Right.
garbage pickup mandates and
Yeah.
all kinds. It's not on the agenda, but this is
That's
something
a
we should.
whole, yeah,
Yes,
that's
it's a whole other
that's a
ball of
whole
wax.
other discussion. We did toss that about, I'm just gonna mention Frank, but one of the reasons was, I think at the time we started looking at it, Shelter Island was actually reversing it. Some other towns were having trouble with it, so
Yeah.
we'll talk about that on
Yes.
another day.
But this
So-
is good stuff.
So certainly, the supervisor is always going to be keen on protecting the area businesses, whether the hotels, motels, larger or smaller. And it's obviously a function of striking the right balance here between affording them access and their guests access to the beach, but also protecting the beach space that we have for the residents. Hi, Joe.
Hello, sorry.
So going back to Eric, if this is in fact going to continue, what has to happen from a code perspective so that the enforcement side of this can be enforced?
Well, it needs to be reincorporated into the code. It needs to be put back in by adopting an amendment to the local law.
Well, that's why we're having this discussion today, so we know if we have in favor to do this,
Right.
Ken and I can go back to code revision and have the code updated to allow this to happen. So we really kind of need a decision here from the board, which direction you want to go in.
Well, the key here is balance. The key is, yes, we want to help our local businesses. Ray brought up some of the cottages and places. But at the same time, the beaches should be also residents, especially some of the smaller beaches. So I think we need to strike that balance.
I mean, one thing that could be considered, if you wanted to, like, I don't know about how much of the bottom line is gonna be affected on a larger hotel chain like the Hyatt or the Hilton Garden Inn or something like, a hotel like that versus the Reeves Cottages or your Moore's Cottages, all right? Those Reeves and Moore, those are more, usually probably something like a week, probably a week or more, the person is gonna be there. So, if there's a desire to strike some kind of balance, that is a differentiation that could be made.
Maybe
Like the type of, the length of occupancy,
visit.
yeah, exactly.
Maybe the length of the visit might be more the way to go, because as you're saying, someone's staying a week, they are bringing money into our economy, so.
But the length of the visit is not going to be able to be policed by us. And then you're putting these placards out there, and the hotel could say, well, you're only here for 2 days, but here, go ahead, use this. I don't think that's something we can police.
I think this is certainly something I want to look at and think about.
Ken, you want to bring it back to code?
Yes.
Okay, just even for Eric, what I did was, because there was nothing in the code, I put it in the form of a resolution. So that's up for the next town board meeting, but I'm not sure if that's the right way to go, or if that's legal, so that's what I kind of want to know now.
Is that for a public hearing?
No, what I did was I just put the old code into a resolution so the town could vote on it so we can move forward in either direction, because we're getting calls now from the operators saying they want their passes for the year. So since there was nothing in the code, I put it through a resolution. I'm not sure if that's legal.
Doing it
if
by
I can do that.
resolution, I think, would just allow it to happen for this
the
year. And
year,
you would
yeah.
have to come back to the board every year to do it.
Yeah.
So that might be something to think about for this year, just do it by resolution, and then Catherine, we have the time to look at the bigger picture and see how it's going to affect and not affect us.
Right.
But we don't want to be creating a problem on the enforcement side for the TCOs.
Correct.
That's the only thing we want to flush out here, I think.
Well,
Concerns about creating a code by means
actually,
of resolution just for,
we were actually operating without it even.
Yeah, so in order to issue a town code violation, there needs to be a provision of code that they're writing this on. So what there is sort of now is like this loophole where people, show up and they just don't have a permit, and I mean, everybody else there does. They have the legal permit that the town code says they're supposed to have. And then there's sort of a directive issue for the TCOs and the police officers, So are we supposed to just look for this permit in this one spot that's on the rear, the driver's side rear window? Or are we supposed to walk around the whole car and look for what looks like it might be a town-issued hotel motel placard, right? So if they're gonna write somebody for not having the permit and they're marking off on there that they don't have a permit, they need to know what exactly it is they're looking for.
Right.
All right.
We have to get over the hump first as to whether we're going to allow it or not allow it. And I think, Catherine, you said you need more time. Would
Well, I
you be
think
able
you
to
guys should talk
revisit?
about it. I mean, it does seem like it should go back to code revision. So,
And I guess the practical problem is, from a timing perspective, the hotels and motels need to know what they're doing here, because the season is really upon us, right?
I think what
We've
Tim
discussed,
was-
we've discussed it at code revision, and code revision basically said, let's take it before the board so we can get an opinion from the board. So that's what we're here today to do. If you need more time, Catherine, what I'm asking is, would next week's work session agenda afford you enough time to make a decision?
absolutely.
Okay, so can we maybe?
Or you can put it to a vote and I can decide how I'm going to vote. Either way.
Well, if
I'm
you
in
want more
favor.
time, I'm willing to give you more time. I don't have a problem with that, but I wouldn't want to go beyond
I
next week.
wouldn't want to go
because it's
beyond next
coming
Thursday's
onto
work
season,
session
yeah.
because we do have the summer season
Right.
upon us. I'm in agreement with that, Tim.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm in favor.
I'm in favor of doing it.
Okay. I think the supervisor's going to be in favor, as we said, of looking out for the businesses, but striking the right balance here with the beach access. So either way, we're going to want to move it forward. So why don't we plan on having that put in for next week?
Perfect.
All right, so I'll do a resolution to publish and post.
Right, let's do
Okay.
that, and we'll read it aloud next week and hopefully move this forward.
for code.
All right?
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys. Okay, so moving forward here, I'm going to ask for a first and a second to go into exec session to discuss one item, which is Scott D. Simone Esquire, matters surrounding the pending litigation entitled PGC Riverhead v. Assessors.
Hang on one second.
Hold on.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Don.
The Barry Long meeting at 11, the Zoom with Catherine.
Yeah, we're going to take execs out so you guys can have the room.
Okay.
All right? So can I have a motion to enter into exec?
Motion.
Yes.
Second.
Okay. Thank you, guys. That's good, right, Don?